Good afternoon and welcome to the Public Works Committee meeting for June the 14th, 2021. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Members of the public are advised that our meetings are webcast live by the City of Hamilton and temporarily archived on the city's website. As well, a reminder that all electronic devices are to be switched to a non-audible function during committee meetings. Members are reminded of the 5-minute time limit, which will be adhered to during this meeting. Members can submit another request to speak if they require more time to ask questions or make comments. Please note that quorum is present and both Councillors Marie and Whitehead are absent. Councillor Whitehead for leave of absence. Just before we begin the actual meeting, General Manager Dan McKinnon has asked for a few minutes to just say a few words of recognition. Dan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the opportunity. So for members of committee, I just wanted to take an opportunity to acknowledge and recognize Debbie Dalvadove. Today is the last Public Works Committee meeting that Debbie will be present at as the Director of HSR. And so just wanted to take a moment to point that out. Debbie was the first hire that I made as the General Manager of Public Works almost 5 years ago. Had she stayed here till September, it would have been Debbie's 5th anniversary as well. And just wanted to say that it has been an extraordinary pleasure working with Debbie. I think she's done tremendous work up at HSR, reinvigorating the staff out there, the culture, the direction of HSR, excuse me, and really putting customers at the center of all the decisions that they make up there. Debbie's commitment to accountability and public service has been evident throughout her time here. She has been a joy to have on our department leadership team, and she has set an example that I think all of us can follow. So I just wanted to make those few comments, Madam Chair, in recognition of the fact that Debbie will be at GIC on Wednesday, but this will be our last Public Works Committee meeting with us, and so just wanted to take the opportunity to do that. So thank you very much for allowing the time.
Councillor Vanderbeek, this is Alicia from Clerks. Just letting you know that
yes, you just have to remind me that I have to push that button. I even fixed it, so I just have to push a button. Anyway, thank you, Dan, and Debbie. Thank you to you two on behalf of the Public Works Committee. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, Madam Chair, there are changes to the agenda. We have 2 added notices of motion. Item 12.1, respecting an investment in Churchill Park in Ward 1, and item 12.2, respecting an investment in the HAAA Park Fieldhouse, also in Ward 1. Thank you.
Thank you. May I please have a mover and seconder to approve the agenda as amended? Moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Pearson. And anyone speaking to that motion? Place your vote. It's on the screen.
Are you, Madam Chair? Just waiting on a vote from Councillor Farr, please.
Thumbs up.
And that vote carries unanimously 8-0.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? I see none. Approval of the minutes of the previous meeting of May 31st. May I please have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Pearson, Councillor Danko. Any discussion on the minutes? I don't see any, so the vote will be on the screen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That carries unanimously 8-0.
Thank you. Consent items. 7.1 is an intersection control list PW 21001C for Ward 6, 9, 11, and 13. May I please have a mover and a seconder to put the report on the floor? Moved by Councillor Tom Jackson, seconded by Councillor Lloyd Ferguson. Any discussion on that? See none. The vote.
Through you, Madam Chair, just looking for a vote from Councillor Collins, please. Wonderful, received. Thank you so much. And that carries unanimously 8-0.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. May I please have a mover and seconder to receive? Why do I have that? To receive items. Sorry, just checking my list here. Where am I? I have 7.1. Oh, may I please have a mover and seconder to receive consent items 7.2 and 7.3A to 7.3C. So 7.2 is sewer use bylaw program for 2020, an annual update, and 7.3 A, B, and C are various advisory committee meetings. 7.3 is Keep Hamilton Clean and Green. 7.A and B are both Keep Hamilton Clean and Green, March the 16th to May the 4th, and 7.3 is the Hamilton Cycling Committee meeting. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Pauls, seconded by Councillor Pearson. Any discussion? Councillor Ferguson?
Yeah, Madam Chairman, I'm looking at the cycling committee report.
Councillor Ferguson, can you turn your video off?
Possibly,
You're breaking up, sorry.
feed that back. There is resolutions, motions E, concrete curbs on Cannon Street, and then notices of motions that got carried on the Ketty Trail, and another one on bicycle lane asphalt quantity during and following road work. This looks like this could cost a lot of money, particularly if you've got to take up all the rubber barriers between the bicycle lane and the traveled road, replace them with poured concrete curbs. And in my experience, to put a concrete curb in, you got to go 8 or 12 inches below the surface and 6 inches above, which means cutting the road and then installing these curbs and then restoring it. But this didn't go through a staff report first. It just came straight to us for approval.
Through you, Madam Chair, this is Alicia from Clerks. Just letting you know that the concrete curbs on Cannon Street is an item on the agenda under item 10.2.
So we're not approving that in this consent item because we're approving the minutes.
Through you, Madam Chair, we're just receiving the minutes, and any items that require approval, which in this case, you're correct, the concrete curbs on Cannon Street is an item that would require approval by the committee, has been separated out in a citizen committee report for your consideration.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll wait till we get there.
Okay. Any other discussion on these items? Councillor Danko. We're not hearing you. You having a?
How about now?
That's much better.
Got audio? Much better. Thank you. Just a quick comment on one of the recommendations in the cycling committee minutes for a painted barrier on the Ketty Trail. An update that we are working with city staff towards some public art installations for the Ketty Trail, including some sort of mural on portions of the barrier and also other public art installations. So that's something that work is ongoing. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? I don't see anyone else. So we have moved and seconded receipt of consent items 7.2 and 7.3 A to C. Moved by Councillor Pearson. The vote is on the screen.
Through you, Madam Chair, that vote carries unanimously 8-0.
Great, thank you. And we're on to item staff presentations. Item 8.1 is enhanced inspection and monitoring, Hamilton Water and Wastewater, PW 21019. It is citywide, and I'd like to call on Andrew Grice, the Director of Hamilton Water, to present and give us an overview. Andrew?
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. Just given our technical challenges, want to make sure everyone can hear me.
I can hear you fine.
All right, so let me just get my screen shared here. Bear with me for 1 second. And do we have visual on the presentation?
We do.
Okay, perfect. So thank you very much. So as mentioned, my name is Andrew Grice, the Director of Hamilton Water, and good afternoon, everybody. And it is really my pleasure to be here today to share with you an update on our enhanced inspections as well as our surface water quality program. These programs were developed with the resources that were approved via motion as part of the 2020 rate budget process. So very simple agenda for today, not too complicated. It's a relatively short and sweet presentation for you. I'll start off by talking about our boots on the ground type of inspections. I'll finish off with our surface water quality program. And just as a quick reminder, there were 5 staff or teammates that were approved as part of the 2020 budget process. 4 of those dedicated to the boots on the ground type of inspections, and 1 for the development of our surface water quality program. So who and what are our enhanced inspections? Well, the team has been dubbed the ECHO team by the group, and that stands for our Enhanced City of Hamilton Outstation team. And really one of the biggest reasons that this team has been successful is the multidisciplinary structure. This team consists of 1 operator who can control the facility, 1 electrician, 1 millwright, and 1 instrumentation technician. That really allows them to identify and fix many issues on the spot. In terms of responsibility, this team is tasked with completing thorough inspections and preventative maintenance at all of our facilities. So that would be our treatment facilities, our pumping stations, our CSO tanks, anything that we own and operate in Hamilton Water. And while we do call them enhanced inspections, I don't want that to be confused with simple preventative maintenance, because it is certainly far more than that. This team is responsible for looking at the facility and process area as a whole to verify its operational functionality instead of just focusing on preventative maintenance on a particular asset. This includes reviewing our process control narrative, our SCADA set points, checking our environmental compliance approval to make sure everything is operating as per requirements, looking at our asset information of the equipment on site, measuring that against what is in our computerized management maintenance system, as well as checking all of our standard operating procedures to make sure everything is operating as intended. On top of that, they do certainly perform the kind of more routine maintenance and fixes to things that they identify. So what have we achieved so far? So the team started in the summer of 2020, so it did take a little while to get the team recruited. The COVID challenges certainly did not help that. It took a little longer than normal to get the teammates on board, but they started at the Main King CSO facility in the summer of 2020. And for a large facility like Main King, it actually took them 4 days to do a full deep dive through that facility to check, fix, and validate everything. For some of our smaller stations, this may take a single day. Well, for some of our even larger, more complex stations, this could take upwards of a couple of weeks. The pictures here highlight some of the field work, pulling of pumps to check impellers and wear rings, looking at access and ventilation within the facility. I'm happy to report that nothing major was found at the Main King site, but certainly validating that in the field is certainly comfort of mind for all of us. In 2020, the team completed inspections at 28 of our facilities. And if we fast forward a little further, the team is now continuing to make their way through the remainder of our facilities, and we do expect that at the end of 2021, we will have gone through all of our 130 approximate stations that we own and operate. The Appendix B accompanying to the staff report does show some of the examples of the deficiencies that we found, but the pictures on this slide really highlight what we found at our Green Hill CSO tank, just as an example. The picture here in the top left is of overgrown vegetation on top of some of our access chambers. May seem like something small, but if we need to get in there, certainly that's something that can impede our access and is relatively important. The picture on the top right is one of the gates at the CSO tank in Green Hill, and it was found that that was not operate that manually. We still had full control over it electronically, but in the event of a power outage and we needed to isolate that system, that gate was not functional manually, so that was corrected. The picture in the bottom left is a small impeller, and it looks like it's in pretty good shape, but that's actually dislodged from one of our small metering pumps and was actually stuck in one of our pressure reducing valves. Pressure reducing valves are very important for us. They monitor pressure or regulate pressure within our system and avoid any major spikes that we have. Certainly an important piece of infrastructure, and identifying this and removing it will ensure that it is there to function as intended. And then the picture in the bottom right is pretty standard for the type of environment that we work in, but that's showing some of the conduits, exit signs, and lights that obviously are not in great operating condition. These do not impact the day-to-day operation of the facility, but are certainly a potential health and safety risk for our staff. So it's important that we find and correct these things. So that's just some of the things that we found as part of our program. And as I mentioned, Appendix B does talk a little bit more about some of the details. In terms of next steps for where we're going for this team, it's really important that we continue to fill gaps within our program. We've had lots of retirements and people moving into other positions. And while the work of this ECHO team is very important, it certainly cannot take away from the other work that we need to do to run a water and wastewater system on a daily basis. We're also in the process of hiring for a vacant project manager position, and we've expanded the responsibilities of that group to provide oversight to this ECHO program. I did mention the team's on track to complete the first round of inspections by the end of 2021 at all of our facilities, but they're also working on a roadmap because this is not a one and done type of program. This is something that's going to go on for eternity, and it's important that we prioritize and have a work plan in place for that. And just as I finish this part of the presentation, I do want to talk a little bit about the actual team. Our current working arrangements really have limited my interaction with this group working from home, but I've had a few conversations with them and seen them on site on a couple of occasions. I can say that they're very passionate and proud about the work that they are doing. So just quickly wanted to thank our team, Mike Furry, Brian Lambert, Paulo Castelli, Todd DeSantis, as well as Jeff Botha and Darren Lister for providing supervision to that team over the last year. So I'm going to move on to our surface water quality program, the second part of the presentation today. And this is really part of our plans to move forwards with a more watershed-focused approach. And one of the big components of this is stakeholder engagement. And you'll see that coming up on a future slide. This program is focused on water quality downstream of our infrastructure. And on the slide, you can see that some of the sources of pollutants include our combined sewer overflows, bypasses from our wastewater treatment plant, cross connections, and even our separated storm system. They carry large volumes of debris, solids, and phosphorus, so it's important that we have good visibility there as well. Major goals of the program are to build a better and larger baseline of water quality data across our watershed, develop open communication and transparency with our stakeholders and the public, as well as be able to respond and investigate to any water quality anomalies that we discover. So this slide is a little busy, but it does lay out a roadmap for this entire program. You can see there are some quick wins early on, but there's also some more long-term strategic initiatives that will take place over the next 5 to 10 years. Our water quality technologist, who is Terry Willert, she was hired in June of 2020. And in the last year, she has done an amazing job building this program and, more importantly, developing relationships with our stakeholders. Currently, a number of samples are collected and they are analyzed. And we're also looking at the data we get from RBG and HCA and the other stakeholders, and some of the parameters that we're looking for that may sound familiar to you: dissolved oxygen, pH, total phosphorus, ammonia, nitrogen, as well as about 30 plus other metals that that can make their way into our natural environment. And over the long term, we should see that this program will help support some other initiatives, whether that be decision making for capital reinvestment, and it also will help us focus the enforcement of our sewer use bylaw program. So that was on the agenda earlier today as one of the consent items. Very active program for us, but certainly using the data that we get here will help us enforce that program even stronger. So I did mention that stakeholder engagement and collaboration is going to be the key to success of this program, and we have been working very collaboratively with our stakeholders since the summer of 2020 to share information about sample locations, any future initiatives that we have planned, all in the spirit of enhancing surface water quality. It's very nice to see how these agencies working together. Tice from RBG, Scott and Lisa from the Conservation Authority, Chris McLaughlin from the Bay Area Restoration Council. They're all very engaged and they're helping us guide this program. Terry, our water quality technologist, she also sits on 4 of the subcommittees of the remedial action plan, and that really helps ensure that our message is consistent for these larger audiences and also allows them an opportunity to provide feedback into our program. And the final bullet there talks about we're in the final stages of finalizing a memorandum of understanding with our external parties. This will allow us to share our data. We currently are sharing data, but from a process perspective, it is important that we have this documented. We're not all going to be around here forever, and we want to make sure that nothing slips through the cracks. So we're almost done documenting that, and then ultimately, once complete, you'll start to see more data even populated that is not within the city's control, but from some of our stakeholders into a centralized location, which is very exciting. You'll see a sneak peek of some of that here in a second. So when developing a program, often one of the first steps is to conduct a gap analysis. And if you look at our city infrastructure, we know we have a large quantity of outfalls across our entire city, so 800 plus. But we don't need to sample at all of these locations. It's really a matter of determining strategic sample locations that represent water quality within the watershed. Should we find anything out of the ordinary, we can certainly deep dive and take that investigation to a more granular level, work our way upstream to specific outfalls, but that's not the intent, is to collect samples at every single piece of infrastructure that we own. In working with our stakeholders, we have determined that there are areas where we do have gaps in visibility, some within Coots, Hamilton Harbor, the Red Hill, and Grindstone Creek. And there's some other areas where we really have a lot of overlap of our sample locations. So that's something that we're continuing to work on with our stakeholders. So this map that you see here is an internal map at this point. It's still under development. Hopefully will be shared here in the very near future. But as I mentioned, we're in the final stages of developing that MOU. And once that is done, that's certainly something we hope to make public as quickly as possible. And it does show the sample locations from the City of Hamilton as well as from all of our agencies. Really what we're looking at is trying to get very broad coverage across our watershed. And if you look at some of the areas where we have high density of sample locations, this may result in some people moving or some agencies moving their sample points slightly to avoid some redundancies, but that'll also give us better visibility in the rest of the watershed. We do have dense coverage near some of our critical infrastructure, like our wastewater treatment plants, but it's something that we'll be working with our stakeholders on to make sure we get good representation throughout the entire watershed. You can see it's mostly clustered in the more centralized urban core, but even as we move our way into the upper serviced part of Hamilton, certainly opportunity to expand our sampling program there as well. So while that map is still internal and under development at this point, we did create a public-facing map that contains the information that the City of Hamilton retains, so our sample locations. So to date, we have publicized the Shadow Creek as well as the Red Hill Creek data to the website. And this is all public facing, but I will certainly admit that trending this data at this point is a little clunky for the average resident. It is not as user friendly as we would like. And it's something that we are working on in the background with the interface to make it more user friendly. But we thought it was best to get that information out there instead of waiting for perfection. But this will evolve over time to be even a better tool in the future. As I did mention, we are almost on our memorandum of understanding, and eventually you will see all those other points start to pop up on this map, and everyone will have access to water quality data from all the different agencies, which is great. And certainly we'll continue to work on making this a more user-friendly environment. So really that is it for the presentation today. Nothing too much. Just wanted to make sure I shared with you what we were doing. And I really do want to thank Council for their support in approving these 5 positions as part of the previous budget process. More eyes and ears out in the field has been a significant help to our programs. I can't emphasize that enough. And I do believe that moving to a more watershed approach is really the way of the future. And I think we're getting a head start on that and maybe seen as industry leaders in that regard. We're certainly drifting a little bit outside of what would be considered a core city mandate, but I think it's certainly the right way to go. So that does wrap up my presentation, but Nick Winters and Susan Gert are with us today. They did most of the heavy lifting on these programs, and myself, and I'll be happy to try and answer any questions that you may have. And I will stop sharing so you can see everybody, Councillor.
Andrew, I appreciate that. I have Councillor Jackson on my list. Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Chair Vanderbeek. Thanks, Senior Director Grice. Just again, one more time for the listening and viewing public, these 5 positions came about council-driven a couple of years ago after the unfortunate situation that came about at Shadow Creek. Through you, Chair Vanderbeek, please, to the Senior Director.
Andrew?
That is correct, through the chair. These were approved as part of the 2020 rate budget process via a late motion brought forward by council.
Councillor?
And Madam Chair, for a number of us, I think it goes without saying, I'll speak for myself, but I know I wasn't alone. We were shocked that primarily Hamilton Water Services had relied on the SCADA system to monitor all these various sites of outflow and the combined sewer overflow tanks and the reservoirs. So as far as I'm concerned, from a traditional standpoint, this enhancement to have actual physical inspectors annually going to each site with an old-fashioned clipboard and checking out exactly whether or not the gates were properly working or not, from my standpoint, only added to and was a companion to current modern systems. Madam Chair, through you to Senior Director Grice, I see here you've completed 28 different facility inspections. Andrew, if my memory serves me right, do we have over 70 of these CSO tank locations, or is it more than that, or is there a combined even greater number when you take in reservoirs and that? Just refresh my memory. Through you, through you, Chair Vanderbeek, to the Senior Director.
Andrew?
So through the chair, Councillor, you are correct. It is a large number of stations. So CSO tanks, we actually only have 9 of the CSO tank facilities. But this program is applicable not just to our CSO facilities. It's our water plant. It's our water pumping stations, reservoirs, water towers, sewer pumping stations, everything that we have on our inventory. And that represents approximately 130 stations. I say approximately because depending on how you slice and dice different process areas at the plant, that number can be slightly higher. But overall, we are capturing all of our assets.
Thank you.
Wonderful. That's great to hear. And lastly, Senior Director, these inspectors, the 4 and the water technologist, they would report up through you directly, or is there a director between them and yourself that they would report to on a regular basis, just so that I understand the org chart? Through you, Chair Vanderbeek, please.
Yeah, so through the chair, so these are kind of 2 distinct programs, although they're very related. So the boots on the ground inspections, the 4 resources that are completing the clipboard list as you described it, those report through our maintenance team and our operations team. So through Nick Winters' area, and then the surface water quality technologist is part of our compliance and regulations team. So that is working more with our environmental monitoring and enforcement group, better alignment with their program. But I would say that the water quality technologist, although it reports there, has a working relationship with various groups. So certainly something that I'm very interested in my position, but also external stakeholders and then the other operational groups within the city of Hamilton. So from a reporting perspective, they're in our compliance and regulation team under Susan Gert, but they kind of have a dotted line to various areas within Hamilton Water.
Thanks, Senior Director. And Chair Vanderbeek, once again, in light of the very unfortunate, unsavory situation, I believe something good has come out of it. And I want to commend Council, this term of Council, that said it was important to have these 5 additional positions to provide even greater checks and balances in place at these approximate 130 locations that look after the water and combined sewer overflow tanks in our city. Thanks, Chair Vanderbeek.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ferguson, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I left my video off this time. I just want to, I was going to ask the same question Councillor Jackson did. So, Andrew, the principal reason why we hired these extra 5 people is to make sure that if we have a valve that's malfunctioning or a gate that's left partially open, that they would be able to look and see that. Can you assure us that that is in their scope of work and they have a checklist they have to go through when they go through these facilities to make sure that we won't repeat the experience we had at Shadow Creek?
Andrew?
So through the chair, this certainly is part of their scope of work. So the four positions that are doing the boots on the ground inspections, this is part of their core mandate. It does vary from station to station because we have different types of equipment, but certainly it even goes beyond that. So analyzing individual pieces of equipment is important so we don't have any future failures. But some of the softer stuff, like reviewing our set points in SCADA and checking our process control narratives and making sure that our asset inventory is identified and labeled correctly, those are just as important as the boots on the ground inspection. So it really is all encompassing. But yes, the checking of all valves and opening and closing, charting of pumps, looking at pumps, yes, that is certainly part of their program.
And that's a written checklist they have to go. That's a written checklist they have to go through. I'm sorry, I got a lot of drilling going on in the background. So that's a written checklist that each one of these 4 operators or 4 employees do now.
Through the chair, that is correct. They have a process that they follow, and like I said, it does vary slightly station to station. A water station is different than a wastewater station, but they do have a checklist and a process that they follow for all of our facilities.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, I don't have anyone else on the list. So if there's no one else on the list, I need a mover and seconder to receive the presentation. Moved by Councillor Danko, seconded by Councillor Ferguson. And the vote will be on the screen.
Through you, Madam Chair, that vote carries unanimously 9-0.
Thank you. Report. May I please have a mover and seconder to put the report on the floor? Moved by Councillor Pearson, seconded by Councillor Nan. Any discussion respecting the report? The vote's on the screen then.
Through you, Madam Chair, that carries unanimously 9-0.
Thank you. Discussion items are item number 10, 10.1, road safety review and appropriate measures at the York Road and Newman Road intersection. Report PW 271A and PED 20196A, which is Ward 13. May I please have a mover and a seconder to put the report on the floor? And if I could pass the floor over to Councillor Nan just for a minute, I would like to move this.
The floor is yours, certainly.
Thank you. So I'm going to move it. I guess I have to leave it with Councillor Nan now for the rest of this item. So I'm going to move it. I do not have a seconder, so if someone will second that, I'd be grateful.
Seconded by Councillor Farr.
Thank you. And could I speak to it, Madam Chair?
Please do.
Thank you. This road safety review has come from a number of avenues, but primarily I think I don't want to give an overview of it. I think that Brian can probably do that much better than I can. But it has been something that's been requested from the constituents in my ward in the Pleasant View area. It is specifically a street that's about midpoint between Highway 6 and Old Guelph Road. And so I am in support of this. I do believe that what the MTO is looking at is worthwhile, and I'm hoping that it will, if it comes to fruition, answer some questions and some safety issues in my ward. So that I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderbeek. And did staff intend to also speak to anything on it?
Through the chair, it's Brian Hollingworth here, Director of Transportation Planning and Parking. Unless there's questions, I didn't plan on speaking to it. This report was presented back in November and it was tabled. It's a number of recommendations, including the first step of endorsing the concept of a roundabout at the York Road off-ramp, which is being contemplated by MTO.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And so it's duly moved and seconded by Councillor Farr. Any questions by my colleagues in Public Works? Seeing none, the vote should be before you electronically. And Clerk Davenport, if you could announce the outcome of the vote.
Through you, Madam Chair, the vote carries unanimously 9-0.
Thank you. Turning the chair back to you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Nan. I appreciate that. Item 10.2, concrete curbs on Cannon Street through the Hamilton Cycling Committee. This is a citizen committee report. May I have a mover and seconder to put the report on the floor? Moved by Councillor Nan, seconded by Councillor Farr. Thank you.
Councillor, sorry, if I could just flip that. It's Ward 2 specifically. I was seconding. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. We'll just switch that around. Councillor Farr, seconded by Councillor Nan. Thank you. Before we move into discussion, I'd like to call on Mike Field, Acting Director of Transportation Operations and Maintenance, to introduce the report. Mike?
Thank you, Mike Field, Acting Director of Transportation Operations and Maintenance. It's a report that's coming from the Cycling Committee, so I don't want to speak on the report specifically, but rather talk about some things that were already done. So they're talking about upgrading Cannon Street West in between James and Hess with curbing, concrete curbing, replacing the current previously existing rubber bumpers. That work has been done already. That work was completed in, I think it was April, May is when we did that. And part of that included new pavement markings, bollards, precast concrete curbs that were installed, not cast and place curbs. And those precast concrete curbs replaced the existing or the old rubber ones. And then their other request is related to Cannon Street East, kind of on east of James Street North over to Sherman. And at the moment, along with Brian Hollingworth group, we're looking at considering doing some enhancement to that section of the cycle track by replacing some of the rubber curbs with precast concrete and filling in some gaps where there's existing gaps without curbs as part of that project, but it's in the review stage at this point in time as far as what the scope and cost would be.
Thank you. Are there any questions or any discussion on the item? Councillor Farr? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the list. Apparently, Councillor Ferguson was there before you, so I'll let him go first. Councillor Ferguson? Not hearing you. If you're speaking.
There. Is that better?
That's much better. Thank you.
So, Mike, are these precast curbs, are they anchored to the ground by steel rods going into the pavement, or do they just sit on the pavement?
Through the chair to the councillor, they are pinned into the ground with rebar.
Okay, and typically when we do these kind of capital expenditures, there's a budget for it. Is this included in the cycling budget?
Yep. Through the chair to the councillor, Brian Hollingworth through the Cycling Works, the COVID recovery mobility work funded that piece of rehab of Cannon Street West.
So
I see Brian. I see Brian on the screen. Would
Brian
you
there?
Through the chair to Councillor Ferguson, we have a project called Cycling Facility Upgrades, and that was considered as part of the capital plan last year and approved by council. There's also funding streams coming in, including the ISIP recovery fund, $570,000 potentially that we've asked for, which could cover some of these cycling project enhancements and upgrades.
Okay, because it would be nice, typical to any other motion, when there's an expenditure involved, how much is it and what account is it being paid from? And I don't see that on this report. I was actually going to move a referral to staff for report back, but it sounds like you have in hand. So there is an existing capital budget to do this, and that the precast curves are not poured in place. Now, with the rubber ones, you could unbolt them and lift them out. If someone was moving so they could back a moving truck off the road and get back it into a driveway. With these things, would they be able to pick those precast barriers up in order to get a moving van into a home, or if they're doing a renovation, so they may be a bin that they have to leave in the driveway for a few weeks? With a permit, can some homeowner do that?
I don't know whether it's Mike or Brian.
through the chair to Councillor Ferguson. Yeah, we could take them up if there was a need to remove them, but I think that we would really look at if someone was trying to occupy that cycle track with anything first. But if we had to, we could pull them up so they could access it. They're also somewhat mountable too. So if you had a moving truck or something, you could mount those curbs without removing them.
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting for a minute that they leave a bin sitting across the bicycle path. They'd want to back it into the driveway of the home. And sometimes they sit in driveways for a few weeks until the renovation is complete. So you'd simply, the vendor would simply back over them rather than remove them to back a big truck in. Is that correct?
Mike?
Through the chair to Councillor, that could be one of the options that they could look at, or we could look at, or to your point, we could pull them up depending on what the scenario is and what kind of truck is trying to access it. There's also, sorry, Mike. There's also bollards there as well, knockdown bollards that are kind of interspersed along the cycle track too. So I think that if someone really needed to access that, we would kind of try and find out why, and then kind of tend to that based on what the needs are, and possibly including temporary removal of those things.
And if someone's moving, does a moving van have to sit out in Cannon Street then to load or unload for a specific home on the south side where the bicycle path is?
Mike?
Through the chair to the councillor, that is the best practice for us, is not to have people occupy that cycle track. And then I should have mentioned too that we don't put curbs in front of driveways. So if someone's trying to access their driveways, they can back in without coming across those drives. So there's no curbing where there's driveways. But
if you said that at the start, I wouldn't have had you ask all these questions then. Okay, that's all I got, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. And next is Councillor Farr. I'm not hearing you, Councillor Farr. I'm sure you're being very eloquent.
I was actually going to bring up that last bit too, so I'm glad it was covered. There's ingress, egress access throughout, and certainly that's the kind of thing we cover. And so, no, I'm fine. I think Councillor Ferguson had his questions answered. I'm happy to move. Thank you for the second from Councillor Nan, and appreciating that last year's budget mandate is helpful here in terms of upgrading this infrastructure. And thanks to Mike. I know he's only been at this position early, but he's been thrown into a few things, and he's taken care of business in very efficient ways, I might add. So I appreciate that he's doing the same on this file too, and certainly appreciating our mandates here.
Thank you. Councillor Nan.
Thank you, Chair Vanderbeek. Just a quick follow-up on the last component about the hardening of the cycle track with the precasts headed east on Cannon. You mentioned that we're just in the process of scoping it out. Any sense of timeline for that section of the track getting hardened?
Mike?
Through the chair to the councillor, Brian can weigh in on this as well. But at the moment, we're looking at opportunities to infill some of the gaps that were existing along there with more curbing and replace the rubber curbing. And at this moment, we're suggesting that that work would be in 2022. We have a lot of cycling projects that we have ongoing this year, as you know. And as far as scheduling those and resourcing them, we're kind of looking at 2022 might be the best time to do the hardening of that piece of Cannon Street East.
Thank you. Much appreciated. Just helps me manage expectations in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have any further speakers on the list. So we have it moved and seconded, and we'll just put the vote on the screen. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, just looking for a vote from Councillor Collins, please.
It's in the chat.
Through you, Madam Chair, that vote carries unanimously, 9-0.
Thank you. And item 11, motion on the installation of traffic calming measures on Mount Pleasant Drive. Councillor Jackson, please introduce your motion.
Chair Vanderbeek, thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Ward 5 Councillor Chad Collins. Installation of traffic calming measures on Mount Pleasant Drive. Whereas the residents of Mount Pleasant Drive, led by petition organizer Mr. Ron Bayless, have submitted a 31-page petition for the installation of speed cushions on Mount Pleasant Drive to address roadway safety concerns as a result of speeding and cut-through traffic. Therefore, be it resolved, A, the Transportation Operations Maintenance Section be authorized and direction to install traffic calming measures on Mount Pleasant Drive, up to 4 speed cushions as part of this year's 2021 traffic calming program fall application. B, all costs associated, Madam Chair, with the installation of these speed cushions be funded from my Ward 6 minor maintenance account at an upset limit not to exceed $25,000. C, the mayor and city clerk be authorized directed to execute any required agreements, ancillary documents, such terms and conditions in a form satisfactory to the city solicitor. Seconded by Councillor Collins. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any discussion respecting this motion? I don't see any, so the vote will be on the screen.
There you, Madam Chair. That carries unanimously 9-0.
Thank you. And moving on to point 2, this is a gypsy moth control program. And Councillor Ferguson, please introduce your motion. I will be seconding the motion. Madam Clerk, does that mean I have to hand the chair off, or can I carry on?
Through you, Madam Chair. This is Alicia from Clerks. You can carry on. You only need to relinquish the chair when you're moving a motion.
Thank you.
I'm going live here in 32 seconds.
You're going live in 1 second.
Oh, sorry. I was just talking to the plumbers on the step ladder right beside me, and but the dust is gone. So it's moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Vanderbeek. Whereas European gypsy moth is a non-native invasive pest to Ontario that defoliates many tree species, whereas year-on-year defoliation of the trees by the European gypsy moth caterpillars may lead to tree mortality, and whereas areas of the city of Hamilton are currently experiencing infestations of European gypsy moth. Therefore, be it resolved that staff be directed to monitor European gypsy moth outbreaks in the city of Hamilton, including but not limited to rural areas, through egg mass counts in 2021, and develop 2022 control program and report back to Public Works Committee for approval. And the staff be directed to create a capital funding detail sheet for a European gypsy moth control program to be considered as part of the 2022 capital budget process in preparation for aerial spraying and other methods of control in the spring of 2022. And Madam Chair, I do want to recognize Councillor Partridge. I see she's online with us today. She actually crafted this motion, but I was going to bring one anyway because it's terrible in Ancaster too. I have a walkway near an oak tree and it's slippery to walk on. And I came in the house yesterday and I just walked beside the oak tree and 4 gypsy moths are in my hair. So it's the worst I've ever seen it in my community. And I'm getting countless emails and calls about it and what we're going to do about it. So this, I tell everybody it's too late for 2022. The helicopter has to be a 2-engine helicopter because it flies at low altitude, and Transport Canada will only approve a twin-engine helicopter. Secondly, the helicopter is all booked up because other municipalities are having the same problem. But we want to be ready in 2022 when this comes in. And this motion will do just that. Director of Forestry staff to come back to us with how we're going to attack this in 22 and find the hot spots. I know my office executive assistant is keeping a list of where the complaints are coming in, so we can start with that as where we should go. But it's clearly a big problem in most Hamilton. It's going to do a lot of damage to all the trees. So the motion before you, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Vanderbeek. Thank you.
Thank you. And I was going to mention that that we were doing this on behalf of Councillor Partridge as well. And I see she's here and she wishes to speak. So I'm going to turn the chair. I'm going to give her the floor. Councillor Partridge, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And first of all, I want to say thank you so much to forestry staff, to Craig Murdoch and his team for recognizing that, you know, this is, as Councillor Ferguson said, it's an unbelievable problem this year. And I'll speak a little bit very quickly to that in a minute. But staff, you know, they jumped on this, helped me pull the motion together. I'm not on the committee, so I want to thank Councillor Ferguson and yourself, Councillor Vanderbeek, for agreeing to move and second the motion. You know, we're talking thousands and thousands of these caterpillars. They're not little. They grow to about 2.5 to 3 inches long, and they are disgusting. And like I say, there's thousands of them. And I have 38 trees on my half-acre property, and I can't ban them all. They're everywhere. And just as a very quick story, you know, the conservation authorities are being devastated by this. We were up at Valence hiking, as we regularly do, our 2-hour hike, and it sounded like it was raining. The sun was shining, it was a beautiful day, and as we're walking through the forest, it sounded like it was raining, that pitter-patter of, you know, when water hits the ground and the leaves, and it was actually the sound of the caterpillars eating the canopy of the trees. And this is the entire area. It is not just a few trees. And, you know, it's also the sound of their poop dropping, which, excuse me, Madam Chair, but I just had to say that because that is a scientific fact. So it is devastating to the trees. They're going to lose at least 60% of their canopy this year. And it does, you know, if not checked, it does lead to some issues. I don't know why we stopped aerial spraying, but that's, you know, neither here nor there at this point. We really need to put a plan together, get back to aerial spraying, and I wanted it to be put into the budget so that it could be considered along with all the other programs that we have. But this one is very, very serious. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Partridge, and appreciate the motion. I don't see any other speakers, so the vote will be on the screen momentarily.
Through you, Madam Chair. Just waiting on a vote from Councillor Collins, please.
I approve. Thank you.
That being said, the vote carries unanimously 9-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. All right. Item number 11.3 is James Street North Boulevard conversion and street tree planting, and that's in Ward 2. Councillor Farr, please introduce your motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's seconded by Councillor Collins. This is a Ward 2 Capital Reinvestment Discretionary Fund project, James Street North Boulevard conversion street tree planting, whereas there is interest from Ward 2 residents in increasing the urban tree canopy on James Street North. Whereas the City of Hamilton has declared a climate emergency in tree planting, and increasing the urban tree canopy provides many environmental benefits to the residents of the City of Hamilton, such as reducing heat island effects, reducing stormwater peak flow, improving air quality, and supporting, of course, biodiversity. And so therefore be it resolved, A, that staff be directed to remove the city-owned asphalt boulevard surface between 529 and 539 James Street North and install street trees and sod at a cost of $35.7K to be funded from the Ward 2 Capital Reinvestment Discretionary Fund, and B, that the mayor and city clerk be authorized and directed to execute any required agreements and ancillary documents with such terms and conditions in a form satisfactory to the solicitor. And I just want to thank Sam Scarlett and many other staff, some engineers we met a week or two ago. Public Works has been great on this file, and I mentioned earlier with Mike on the cycling infrastructure and other issues recently, Mike Field, it's been very efficient. This is actually a motion that comes only weeks following, maybe a month and a bit, following the massive water main break that we had in that very area, which has led to actually this resident-driven initiative Already, staff have completed tree planting in what we call phase 1. This completes the two-phase project that the residents in that area who endured a real nasty water main break not too long ago have given me my marching orders on. So I would appreciate your support, and I know the residents in that area will appreciate what is so much more than beautification, but it's that too. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Any discussion respecting 11.3? All right. Then we'll go straight to the vote. So it's moved by Councillor Farr and seconded by Councillor Collins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That vote carries unanimously, 9-0.
Thank you. 11.4. Improve route detouring during construction closures. Councillor Farr, please introduce this motion. I don't hear you, Councillor Farr.
Moved by myself, thank you, Madam Chair, and seconded by Councillor Nan. Whereas a recent truck route detour submitted by a third-party contractor and signed off on by City of Hamilton Public Works staff failed to prevent many large trucks from entering residential streets in the North End. Whereas trucks that ignored detour sign notices and pylons and entered the residential streets created grave public safety concerns for residents who, along with their ward councillor, regularly witnessed large trucks maneuvering through narrow passages, tight turns, and one truck even down power lines. Whereas no confirmed enforcement appeared to be in place ahead of the construction project, instead, enforcement appeared only to be requested as a reaction to the unsafe disruption caused by the illegal cut-throughs by trucks. By that time, limited police resources prevented any consistent enforcement practices. This despite what appears to be a policy of required police enforcement for only some types of construction works in Hamilton and not others. Whereas having a proper and proactive detour plan that covers all eventualities, including but not limited to trucks cutting through residential neighborhoods, is sound public safety policy. Therefore, be it resolved, A, that the appropriate City of Hamilton staff from Public Works be requested to investigate and report back to Public Works Committee on how the detour plan failed the residents of the North End neighborhood during the weekdays of June 7th through the 11th, 2021, and related to the CN rail repairs that closed Wellington Street North during that time. And B, that the appropriate City of Hamilton staff from Public Works be requested to report back on measures to enhance the detour process, thus ensuring proactive public safety, and that for future, no trucks ever have an option to illegally cut through a residential neighborhood during a construction detour period, as the rule is at any other time. And so very quickly, I think the motion pretty much speaks for itself. This was a rather harrowing event that happened particularly on Monday and Tuesday of last week in the North End and on the east side of the North End, but there were trucks going down Burlington and heading to James, even heard of a few on McNabb, but Mary, Ferguson, Wood, Macaulay, Simcoe, it was absolute mayhem. And it wasn't fair to a lot of our staff who were dropping everything to work with me and scrambling to make this right after the fact. It wasn't fair to our Hamilton Police Services, although I have to thank Superintendent Hennick. He came through big time and certainly provided a lot of policing when we needed it and when he could make them available. And I watched them in action too, but they were never part of the discussion prior to the project. They were never part of the to my knowledge anyway, and this motion is just asking for staff to tell us what went on here, but they were never part of the planning stage in the detour. And so I think it would have been really helpful that they parked in the appropriate spots, just as we see just this morning coming down Hunter taking a left, coming down James taking a left at Hunter where our bike lane work is being done. There was a black and white with the cherries flashing and clearly parked there while that intersection was being fixed. That's what I think should be doing here, particularly on truck routes, to avoid this disastrous event from ever happening again. Finally, it especially obviously wasn't fair to the residents. It was a few days of transit mayhem, as I said, down power lines, massive 18-wheelers trying to navigate narrow turns and narrow streets with parking on both sides, and over again. This wasn't just a couple of isolated incidents, folks. I have lots of video to prove it, and certainly lots of correspondence to our office that started really in the first hour of this CN project closure at Wellington on Burlington Street North. And I was hoping that given the magnitude of the issue, it would be solved in about that amount of time. But we had 2 days of mayhem. It shouldn't happen. It really was harrowing. I appreciate that the patience the residents in the North End have showed. And I want to thank staff in advance. I think this would be a very helpful report to all of us. It's the potential is there, and maybe some of you have been around for a while have seen this, for it to happen anywhere in our city. And so it really can't happen again. And it comes down to some sort of process prior to this construction where we lost sight of what we needed to focus on in terms of preventing this. And so we had this third party, I guess, a detour specialist working on behalf of, I'm assuming, the contractor, who put a detour plan in place. Our city staff from Public Works, not sure exactly who, they sign off on that. And then the councillor and residents scramble and in great concern for a number of days. It did mitigate as the week went on. Thanks again to Mike Field and others who really were dropping everything and trying to help us with this, but we shouldn't have been in that position in the first place. I think they get that. They know I respect that we're going to hopefully address this in short order. And as a committee, I think finally I'll say, Madam Chair, really important that I get this on the public domain, and we bring some maybe policy to this, but at the very least it's important because I think the residents need to see that we're taking this very seriously. So much appreciated, and thank you, Councillor Nan, for the second.
Thank you. Any discussion on this? I don't see any, so the vote will be on the screen.
I approve, Madam Chairman. It's Councillor Collins.
Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, that vote carries unanimously 9-0.
Great, thank you very much. Point 5 is the purchase of 5 digital speed signs for Ward 7. Councillor Pauls, please introduce your motion.
Thank you, and I hope Councillor Danko could second that for me. Thank you.
Okay.
Whereas there is an increased residents requesting the installation of DSS boards throughout Ward 7 to address roadway safety concern as a result of speeding, cutting through traffic, and whereas there is a growing reduced impacts of transportation operation and maintenance of equipment. Therefore, be resolved that the transportation operation and maintenance staff be authorized and directed to purchase 5 digital speed sign boards for the use throughout Ward 7 at the discretion of the Ward 7 councillor, that all costs associated with the purchase of 5 digital speed signs boards be funded from the Ward 7 Capital Reinvestment Discretionary Fund number 3302109700 at the upset limit, including contingency not to exceed $20,000, and that the mayor and the city clerk be authorized and directed to execute any required agreements and ancillary documents with such terms and conditions in a form of satisfactory to the city solicitor. And I'm putting this through because in the last 2 months especially, I've had so many requests for speed bumps. I had so many requests for traffic calming. And I thought if we get these signs, and when I talked to the residents and I said that if they would like one, they're all so happy to try it and to see if it will deter or change driving behavior. So that's why I'm requesting to buy 5 and put them in some location that the residents request. Thank you, and I appreciate your support.
Thank you. Any discussion on this item? I don't see any, so the vote will be on your screen.
Through you, Madam Chair, that vote carries unanimously 9-0.
Thank you. And we're down to notices of motion. Item 12.1 is investment in Churchill Park, which is Ward 1. Councillor Nan, please introduce your notice of motion. And are you leaving it as a notice of motion, or are you hoping to escalate it to a motion?
Thank you. Clerk Davenport, could you confirm was the intention for both of these motions to remain notice?
For you, Madam Chair, the intention is for both of these to remain as notices of motion.
Thank you. So sponsoring on behalf of Ward 1 Councillor Wilson, investment in Churchill Park, whereas the City of Hamilton owned field house facilities in Ward 1 are maintained by the City of Hamilton's Facilities Operations and Maintenance section of the Energy Fleet and Facilities Management Division Public Works, and whereas many of the concurrent field houses in Ward 1 need life cycle repair and accessibility upgrades, and whereas the flexible community space will enhance all-season programming at Churchill Park and will draw more users to the park, and whereas the Churchill Park has been identified by the community as a priority facility in need of improvement and accessibility, including accessible washrooms to support clubhouse users, and therefore be it resolved, A, that Public Works facility staff be authorized and directed to retain a prime design consultant to undertake both a feasibility study of accessibility improvements as well as cultural heritage study of Churchill Park to determine recommendations for upgrades to support the community and programming uses. B, that the funding for the feasibility study of accessibility improvements as well as the cultural heritage study of Churchill Park at a cost of $150,000 to be funded through the Ward 1 Area Rating Reserve Count 108051 be approved, and C, the mayor and city be authorized and directed to execute any required agreements and ancillary documents with such terms and conditions that are satisfactory with the city solicitor. Remains as a notice for next meeting, and then I guess do I introduce the second notice of motion as well, Councillor Van
No,
der Beek?
I'll finish this one and then we can go to the second one. Is there any, I guess there's no discussion on the notice
because
anyway.
it's just a notice, yeah.
So you might as well go to 12.2, which is investment in the HAAA Park Fieldhouse in Ward 1.
Sure, and for the public record, it's investment into HAAA Park Fieldhouse, sponsoring on behalf of Ward 1 Councillor Wilson, whereas the City of Hamilton owned fieldhouses, facilities in Ward 1 are maintained by the City of Hamilton's Facilities Operations Maintenance section of Energy Fleet and Facilities Management Division Public Works, and whereas many of the current field houses in Ward 1 need life cycle repair and accessibility upgrades, and whereas future investments are anticipated that will include a redevelopment of spray pad and playground that will draw more users to HAAA. And whereas HAAA Fieldhouse has been identified by the community as a priority facility in need of improved accessibility to support the users of the playground, spray pad, and other park amenities, therefore be it resolved that the Public Works facility staff be authorized and directed to retain a prime design consultant to undertake a feasibility study of accessibility improvements, including a cultural heritage assessment of the HAAA Fieldhouse to support the community programming and anticipated increased use after future investments in the park infrastructure. B, the funding come from at a cost of $150,000 from the Ward 1 Area Rating Reserve Account 108051 be approved, and C, the mayor and city clerk be authorized and directed to execute any required agreements and ancillary documents with such terms and conditions for in a form that is satisfactory with the city solicitor. And they both remain notices. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other notices of motion? Seeing none, I'll turn the page. And we're on to general information and other business. So we have item 13.1, which is amendments to the outstanding business list. Can I have a mover and seconder to approve the amendments? Moved by Councillor Pearson, seconded by Councillor Danko. Thank you. Is there any discussion about this? I don't see any, so the vote will be on the screen.
Through you, Madam Chair, that vote carries unanimously 9-0.
Thank you. Was there any other general information or other business from anyone? Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, and I just a query that I'd like to leave with staff, and I think David Lamont is in on this meeting if I see his His name is if he's there. Madam Chair, I just want to put on the floor, I'm thrilled that I'm having a lot of upgrades being done in Ward 10, both by Hydro and by Bell, being the Bell fiber optics, etc. The concern that I've had and that is being brought to my attention is that when Hydro is doing their upgrades, where they're removing the below grade boxes, bringing them to surface grade, and also upgrading the wires. They replace any sod that's been disrupted or soils around boulevards and lawns. They're replacing with sod. I have Bell going in at the same time now, and actually some places going right back over where Hydro's been that have done a beautiful job putting sod down, and Bell's going in and they're just putting topsoil and seed. I have had discussions with David Lamont about that, and that I think is part of the agreement, but that's what the city approved in the agreements for Bell. And I guess my query today is that can we coordinate this a bit better? Because it's very frustrating to residents who, number one, have sod removed, number two, have sod put back, and then number three, have topsoil and seed put down. You can imagine the frustration. So I don't know if David would like to speak to it, but I really think that we need to coordinate this a little bit better. And because it's very difficult to deal with it in the field. I have numbers of residents, and I do appreciate that staff have tried to help some. I mean, I had one gentleman, won beautification awards for years, that all of a sudden had topsoil and seed put down, was not happy. So if I don't know, Madam Chair, through you, if Mr. Lamont would like to comment, or that we can at least have this on the radar going forward and that we correct it and make it more fair to residents.
Well, I see him on the screen, so I'm going to ask him to speak. David.
Thank you very much, David Lamont, Manager of Geomatics and Corridor Management. That's a soft surface repair, and that's up to the utility to manage and to restore. It doesn't go through our shop for through a contractor, so they make judgment calls based on local conditions. I know in my area when they ran through with the Bell Fiber program, the topsoil and seed, they put around all the flush mounted boxes, and it took very well, and it looks fantastic. I'm not sure about specifically if they take out larger areas. You would think that it would be more advisable for them to replace it with a more stable sod surface. But we have had a lot of good results with the seed program. But we'll take that back to our Bell people and have a discussion with them so that they can make better choices in order to reduce the amount of inquiries we get.
Thank you. And I'm sure staff have received complaints as well, and I appreciate that. I was led to believe that it is part of the agreements that we approved with the Bell services. So whatever we can do to coordinate this a little better. I know it's very difficult because when they're in a whole neighborhood, you start replacing one or two properties with sod when it was only supposed to be topsoil and seed. It now presents huge issues. So I'll leave it for staff, and I appreciate that they will review this. So at least I can tell the residents, what we see, that there is a disconnect here and maybe something should be put in place that's more efficient. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Collins?
Yes, on the same issue, Madam Chairman, I'm getting the same response as Councillor Pearson was as it relates to Bell advising that they have an agreement with the city that calls for the seed instead of the sod. And so I know Lucy and I are probably at 24 calls through this process, and it's been ongoing for several months now through my Stony Creek area, and now it's gravitating into East Hamilton. So I think there just needs to be some clarification when Bell reps are speaking to residents. If the default is, the city's given us permission to put this down, and we haven't, as David just mentioned, we need to be clear that this is Bell's decision to do that, and the city is not part of whatever standards they've adopted as part of this project related to remedial works.
David?
Can I speak to that? Dave Lamont, Manager of Geomatics and Corridor Management, through the chair. Just to be clear, we do not have an agreement to say that they have to put down topsoil and seed. That's not true. So we do have guidelines that we follow, and that's a business choice that has been made.
Okay. And that's good to know, David. Thank you, because I think the Bell reps are telling residents another thing, which is unfortunate.
Through the chair, yes, I'm gathering that at this point, and it will be discussed at our next meeting with Bell. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Anything further from anyone? I don't see anyone. I need a motion to adjourn, please. A mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Pearson and seconded by Councillor Pauls. And the vote will be on the screen. Yes.
And through you, Madam Chair, that vote carries unanimously 8-0.
8-0. Thank you. And thank you for your time this afternoon. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.